Have you ever noticed how we often treat joy as if it were a rare and mysterious bird that might accidentally land on our shoulder if we are lucky? We spend so much of our energy chasing after a big idea called happiness, which feels like a long-term project or a destination we have to reach. But joy is different. Joy is that quick, bright burst of energy that makes you want to smile or jump up and down. It is physical and it is fleeting. Think about the last time you saw a child blowing bubbles in a park. They are not thinking about their 5-year plan or their retirement fund. They are fully in their bodies, reacting to the shimmering, round shapes floating in the air. As adults, we often look at that and think it is lovely but perhaps a bit juvenile. We have been taught that being a serious person means focusing on serious problems and that anything light or colorful is somehow less important. We move through gray offices and beige homes, telling ourselves that these neutral colors are sophisticated. But deep down, there is a part of us that still remembers what it feels like to be moved by a bright splash of color or a repeating pattern of polka dots. We have built a world that is efficient but often feels empty of spirit. We are going to explore why these small, sensory moments are not just silly extras but are actually vital clues to our survival and thriving. We are going to look at how we can stop waiting for joy to happen to us and start designing our surroundings to make joy a repeatable part of our daily lives. To understand the power of joy, we have to look past the surface idea that it is just a nice feeling with no real purpose. On the surface, we see joy as a light emotion. When a designer says they want to create something that brings joy, they are often met with silence from professors or experts who think work should be about solving substantial problems. The surface concept here is that joy is a luxury for people who do not have real worries. We think that if we are struggling with a difficult season of life, we are not allowed to feel joy. We assume that joy and hardship cannot live in the same house. This leads many of us to push joy to the very edges of our lives. We save the colorful clothes for the weekend and the fun decorations for a birthday party. We live in a default state of gray and beige because we think it makes us look professional and mature. We assume that happiness is something we will eventually achieve once everything in our life is perfectly in place. But the surface of our daily routine often hides a deeper hunger for connection and vitality that only these small, intense moments of joy can satisfy. Behind this surface view lies a hidden assumption that our environment has no effect on our internal state. We often assume that our feelings come purely from inside our heads and that the color of our walls or the shape of our furniture does not matter. This hidden assumption suggests that we are separate from the physical world. But the hidden truth is that our bodies and brains are constantly reading our surroundings for signs of safety and abundance. When we see bright colors or round shapes, our brain receives a signal that says the world is a good place to be. We assume that joy is accidental, but the hidden reality is that it is actually a biological response to specific sensory qualities. For example, why do people all over the world love flowers or fireworks? It is because they represent abundance and energy. We have been taught to downplay our joy because we do not want to seem frivolous or like we are bragging. But the hidden truth is that when we overexpress our joy through a happy dance or a laugh, it creates a biofeedback loop that tells our brain we are in an upward spiral. We assume that joy is for children, but it is actually our natural state as human beings, and we have simply forgotten how to stay available to it as we age. When we look at the structural pattern of our modern lives, we see that we have concentrated all our efforts on the private realm. We put effort into our own living rooms but leave our public spaces feeling cold and commercial. The structural pattern of the United States, for example, often lacks the beautiful common gathering places you might find in older European cities. Our public structures are often designed for economic activity rather than the creation of communal joy. We see this same pattern in our schools and offices, where the architecture is meant to be invisible and quiet so we can focus on productivity. This structural grayness creates a feeling of malaise that we often cannot name. However, there is another pattern we can tap into, which is the pattern of repetition and multiplicity. In nature, joy often comes in clusters, like a field of wildflowers or a school of colorful fish. We can use this structural insight to create joy in our own spaces. Instead of one colorful mug, imagine a shelf of them. Instead of one plant, imagine a garden. This pattern of abundance tells our nervous system that there is more than enough to go around. It breaks the structural slump of a bad day by providing a physical reminder that the world still holds beauty. We can reframe our entire perspective by seeing ourselves as joy spotters rather than just problem solvers. Instead of waiting for a lucky break, we can reframe our relationship with our surroundings by recognizing that we can build joy into the structure of our lives. Reframing joy means seeing it not as a distraction from serious work, but as the fuel that allows us to do the work. Many people who work on the most difficult and heavy problems in society are some of the most joyful people you will ever meet. They have reframed their joy as a tool for resilience. When we feel guilty about being joyful during hard times, we can reframe that guilt as a sign of our connection to the world. Joy is not a contradiction to suffering, it is the evidence of life continuing in spite of it. We can reframe mundane tasks, like getting a child ready for school, by introducing a joyful ritual, like playing a different favorite artist every morning. This shift in perspective turns a slump into a celebration. By reframing our bodily movements, like spinning around or jumping, we can get out of our heads and back into our joyful bodies. Applying this to daily life starts with the small, tangible things you can touch and see. You can apply the aesthetics of joy by adding a splash of color to your workspace or your home. It does not have to be a big renovation, even a colorful coffee mug can be a repeatable chance for a moment of joy. You can apply the habit of joy spotting by training your eyes to look for the strange and the beautiful as you walk down the street. When you see something that makes you smile, share it with someone else. This is called a green flag in a relationship, where you actively celebrate good news with another person. You can apply the practice of overexpressing your positive emotions to reinforce that upward spiral in your brain. If you receive a good email, do a happy dance. If the sun comes out after a week of rain, take a moment to stand in it and feel its warmth on your skin. We can also apply this to our communal life by advocating for more joy in our public spaces, like colorful crosswalks or playgrounds that are not just safe but truly imaginative. By being a collector of humor and joy, you fulfill your responsibility to pass that energy on to others. Even in seasons of loss, you can apply the principle of staying available to joy. You do not have to force a smile, but you can keep a window open in your heart for the possibility that a small, joyful thing might still find you. It is important to remember that joy evolved for a reason. It is one of the 7 universal emotions that all humans share across all cultures. It moves us toward things that are beneficial for our survival and thriving. When we ignore joy, we are ignoring a vital part of our human nature. In a society that is often very individualistic, choosing to share joy is a radical act of connection. We should not feel pressure to be joyful all the time, but we should feel entitled to it. A bad day can still have a single joyful moment, and that moment might be the only thing we remember years from now. We are the designers of our own experiences, and we have the power to turn physical matter into intangible emotion. Whether it is through a colorful piece of clothing or the act of planting a garden, we are participating in the ancient human tradition of making the world feel a little more alive. Joy is not something we have to earn by being perfect, it is something we deserve simply because we are here. By choosing to see the world through the lens of joy, we transform the mundane into the magical. We find that the essence of a good life is not found in the absence of problems, but in the presence of these small, bright flashes of connection and color. If you looked around your room right now and decided to break the rules of being a serious adult, what is the one bright, colorful, or silly thing you would add to your surroundings just to remind yourself that joy is your natural state?